Hello everyone, it's Micah, and on today's Bakeaway, I'm going to introduce you to my kitchen setup, um, so you can compliment me on how good of a job I did, or you can critique me on like what maybe I could do differently. Um, I'm going to be showing you pictures from the different recipes that I'm using, uh, but I kind of wanted to introduce you to like my whole baking setup that I've used in my kitchen. I have a very small studio here with a very small kitchen, so I've had to optimize it so that to prioritize baking. Even though I do regular kitchen stuff in here, I've tried to like put it all to the side so that I can really have all of my counter space or most of my counter space available for baking prep. And after doing 3 bakes here, as of the recording of this video, I can tell you I needed it. I need every inch of space because baking takes up so much counter space. And if there's one thing that I'm going to have to keep reinforcing to myself is that it's okay to use a million bowls. It's okay to use every square inch of space because that's the only way that you can kind of keep yourself sane when you're baking. Otherwise, you'll have things stacked on other things. You'll lose track of where things are. Even as organized as I've tried to be with these bakes, within like 10 minutes of being in the weeds, sifting ingredients and putting ingredients into different containers, it can start to look really crazy in the kitchen, even under the most organized of circumstances. So the kitchen setup for me has been a real adventure. Without further ado, here's my kitchen. So this is it. That's literally it. That's all the kitchen space I have. So I've tried to scoot all of the appliances that I need to keep on the counter. I've tried to keep those as far back and as much in the corner as possible. The one you'll see that I very judiciously left a couple of things that I use very often on the counter, and I try to keep them like out of the way where they probably won't impede me too much. Like the ice machine in the back left corner is pretty obnoxious, and I mean it's cute, but it's really large for the function that it serves. And if you hear a clunk in the background during this video, it's because I'm making ice with it right now. But keeping it all the way over in that corner means that it's using real estate that I probably won't, I'm less likely to need. So I keep that up there. I will not be getting my cottage license anytime soon because, as you can see, I keep cat food and cat treats on the counter, which means I have a cat here in the studio. I clean my counters thoroughly prior to bakes, and I monitor everything very closely to make sure that my cat, Mr. Amir, is not partaking, not being curious, not doing anything with the stuff. Luckily, he's not into baked goods. He's more of a meat eater, like most cats are, so there hasn't been any issue with that. But just rest assured, number one, not applying for my cottage food license, so I'm not selling my food commercially. And number two, I am thoroughly cleaning my kitchen before and after each bake so that I don't have any issues. So anyway, full disclaimer there. And then of course my stand mixer, and then the coffee maker. I've thought about moving the coffee maker to a different place, but I just don't have any other good place for it, and moving it back and forth or into a cabinet or behind a counter somewhere just wasn't feasible. So the coffee maker is kind of in the way. I am able to scoot it further back into the corner, but as you can see, I have basically a little corner piece of counter there which I can use, and I do a lot of my prep work there. I do have the stove top, which is good, and you will notice that I do have my handy little oven thermometer hanging from the rack in the oven, which gives me a lot of comfort, because I guess I just assumed that technology being what it is, a thermometer was a thermometer, and that if I'm buying a however many $100 oven, not thousands, this oven is very much in the economical range. that the temperature that you set it to, that you ask it to preheat to, would actually be the temperature that it goes to. But what I've learned through uh, reading online and just my experience with this oven thermometer is that the temperatures are very different from what the oven tells you it is. It's more of an average, which I don't know. I'm still grappling with like how to really reconcile that. I feel like my oven takes about 10 or 15 more minutes to actually get up to the temperature it says it is, based on the oven. The oven thermometer is telling me that the oven's at like 300 when the oven itself is telling me it's at 350. So I'm like, which one do I believe? So now I'm having to kind of negotiate between the oven thermometer and the setting on the oven itself. So I know I'll get more and more familiar with how that works in practice as I'm baking, but that's a huge sticking point for me right now. Like I really don't know how to kind of interpret that. And what I've read online is that ovens will fluctuate, and like you kind of have to take an average over 30 minutes to see if it's at the right temperature. But to me, if you're doing a bake, and most bakes like cookies are 15 minutes, cakes are you can be up to about 30 minutes. If you don't want the oven to be an average of 350 degrees when you're baking a cake, don't you want it to be, I mean, let me know in the comments if I'm being too precise about this, but don't you actually want the oven to be 350? Like, you don't want it to be 330 and then 380 and then drop back down to 3, and then, to me it seems like you would really actually, for a real bake, you would want it to be at that right temperature. So I've practically speaking, in the bakes that I've done so far, I've been fiddling with the oven settings, because I feel like the oven I don't feel like the oven thermometer is actually telling me it is much lower than the oven temperature. So I'm jacking up the temperature until the thermometer gets to where the recipe says I should be baking at. So this is, for me, a huge stress point. I just realized in the picture there's also a bug trap down there. So whoopsie. But yeah, like I don't live in a perfect environment. We have had some issues, but again, I'm thoroughly cleaning all my surfaces. So be grossed out if you need to be, but like sometimes people have these issues in their kitchens. So I'm trying to head that off as much as possible. That's also, and also I have the stand mixer draped with a kitchen towel, precisely because I know that things can collect especially if you don't use that for maybe a week or more. Things can start to fall in and collect in there. So I do have that. That's the reason I have the towel draped over the mixer. So basically, I have the stove surface, and I may order an overlay, like a cutting board or something that matches the footprint of the top of the oven, since it is flat on top, and I can create an extra work surface that way. I can still use the top of the stove itself, but like something that's wood might work better for certain prep purposes. So that's something that's sort of on my shopping list to do. So basically, I have the top of the oven, I have that corner over on the left, and then I have the stand mixer area, and that's usually where I'll pile my ingredients that are going into the mixer as I'm doing my mise en place. And so that's my basic setup. And my baking cabinet, my baking pantry, is basically those white cabinets that are over the stand mixer and the coffee maker. So next photo of my setup. Okay, so this is my baking pantry. This is stocked with all the ingredients that I needed for my first several bakes. And so you see all the usual suspects in here. The one thing that's not in here is the flour, because I'm keeping the flour in. The flour that I'm currently working through is in the refrigerator, and I also have some other flour which I've already pre-stocked for when I need it. that I've got in the freezer. So I'm trying to keep things as fresh as possible. And obviously, other refrigerated ingredients like butter and sour cream and buttermilk are in the fridge. Um, but this is my dry goods collection. Probably the most interesting thing here uh, to comment on is the dry milk. Milk is often needed in small quantities in a lot of recipes, and I don't want to have to buy a full quart or half gallon of milk every time I need that and then have the rest of it go bad. So for the one recipe I've had so far, I've just reconstituted some dry milk and used that in the recipe. Hopefully that didn't have an adverse effect on the recipe, but I just feel like it's a more responsible option, and I hate wasting food, and also, I am lugging groceries. It's already heavy enough without having an extra half gallon of milk that I'm not only going to use a small fraction of. Um, so anyway, that's basically my baking pantry as of right now. Next picture is my baking rack. This is where I'm keeping this is the bookshelf that I used to keep by my entrance to this unit. It was filled with books, but now I filled it up with stuff that I use for baking. The layout here is in process, but generally speaking, I keep. You know what? I don't think I have. I didn't even capture the top shelf of this bookshelf. On the top shelf, really all I have at this point are some various cake decorating tools that are being housed in a top of a cake dome, and then my kitchen towels. Those are the only things that are really on the top shelf. On the top shelf that you can see here, you can see I have what's in that wire container is basically all the spatulas and whisks and other kitchen tools, and measuring cups and so on and so forth. And then over to the right, I have all of my little small bowls that I use for mise en place mainly. And then there's also a coffee grinder over there, which I'm now calling my spice grinder, because I bought a Burr coffee grinder for the coffee. So now I'm just going to, as I need fresh spices for recipes, I do have the spice grinder on the ready there, the coffee grinder as a spice grinder. On the middle shelf there, you'll see all the baking pans, and I bought most of these brand new within the past few weeks, because the bundt pan I bought a couple of years ago because I had a special request for a pound cake, and I said, okay, I'm going to do it right. So I went out and got an official bundt pan for it. So I'm glad I made that investment. I've already baked several things in it, so I feel pretty good about that. All those pans, like the tart pans, are older and were more or less inherited and brought over from my house. Those tart pans can, first off, I'm not in the business of doing tarts yet. I haven't done my first tart yet, but I felt like those were quite high quality enough, even though they're a little older. I'm going to try washing them a couple more times to get a little bit more of the age off of them. But that's one thing where I decided to do more or less secondhand. The other pots and baking sheets and so forth are new. And then at the bottom, we've got storage containers and paper goods, plastic wrap. I've got parchment sheets and parchment rounds in 2 different sizes. And then we have my rolling pin and cookbooks. And on the very bottom, we have a few more cooking books and mixing bowls on the bottom. So that's basically my setup. So all of the stuff that I use for baking is on this rack. So between that, and this is off to the right of the baking pantry and where the stand mixer is. So I feel like I have a pretty good flow right now in my kitchen. It makes me feel like a professional. Like I've really thoughtfully sort of appointed my kitchen and kept everything pretty handy. The biggest problem I have right now is that all of my whisks and spatulas and so forth are all in that one little wire thing. So I have to go digging into that digging in the crate, as it were, to find stuff, and that can get a little annoying. Oh, and on the top of the wire thing, those round things are my flour sifters. Or my sifters, I should say. Um, I opted for the sifters where you basically just pat it on the side to sift. I hate those crank sifters, but more on that as we go through the recipes. So, and then the next part of my setup is this. I have a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet, an Excel workbook, as a matter of fact, where I keep track of all of my shops, where I take notes on all the recipes that I'm doing, and basically I go through the recipes and I build my shopping list from my recipes, and then when I feel good about that, I will take a picture of it, because I'm, pulling a computer out in a grocery store isn't really convenient, but I can get the picture on my phone and shop from that. And those little numbers off to the side are the measuring units, which are very inconsistent and imprecise, but more or less, unless it's designated otherwise, those are grams. I'm trying to get used to measuring everything in grams and converting everything in grams. So I'm still learning how to, what the best way is going to be to inventory, because, the first couple of bakes, it's fine, because I started with nothing and built up. And that's how I built up what I showed you in my cabinet. But from now on, I'm going to have to deal with the fact that I have inventory on hand already, and I'm going to have to start doing almost like I'm running a business. And I used to, for 7 years, I worked in an ice cream shop, so I know about keeping par levels and doing inventory. So I feel like I'm going to, as overwrought as it seems to manage this like a business, I feel like I'm going to have to start working from an inventory type setup, so that when I'm shopping for my recipes, so to speak, when I'm inventorying what I'm going to need for my next several bakes, that I kind of have to have an inventory, a good visual of what I have on hand in order to know what I'm going to need to buy. With such limited space, I can't just, and the fact that I'm not really doing a lot of high volume baking, I can't really afford, and I don't have space for large amounts of ingredients. So I'm going to have to continue to massage that process, but I just wanted to give you a little peek into how I'm trying to manage it for right now. So that's my baking setup. If you have any notes on the way I have, on what I have, and maybe how I could improve my space, improve my organization, I very much see this as an iterative process. As I get further into it, I'm going to understand how, this doesn't work here, this works better here, and change my processes on an ongoing basis to reflect what I've learned as I go through each bake one at a time. But I thought I would give you a tour of my baking setup. And so today's bakeaway is, I'm trying to be organized. Hope it works.